The Champions League knockout stage draw has just finished, and we now know which teams will be versing each other in the round of 16. In today's video, I'll be looking at all the teams, looking at all the fixtures, and giving you guys my early thoughts on which teams I think have a better chance to advance to the next round, and which teams I think might get knocked out. Quickly, before we get into this video, I've been hearing a lot of people react to this knockout stage draw, with people saying that this is one of the worst draw they've ever seen. Now, I know there's only 2 English teams still left in the Champions League, but if you watch some of the other clubs from around the whole world, you would know that some of these teams are playing incredibly this season, and there's definitely room for a lot of upsets. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. The first matchup I'm going to talk about, and in my opinion, this is probably the best matchup in this round of 16, is Napoli against Barcelona. Obviously, since I am a Napoli fan, I am going to be rooting for Napoli in this draw, but I think this is going to be an incredibly close draw. Both Barcelona and Napoli are playing very well this season, not as good as they were last season, but still are very good teams, and I don't even know who is going to advance. If you look at these teams over the last 5 years since 2019, Napoli have faced Barcelona on a total of 6 different occasions, and Napoli have never won. Barcelona have beaten Napoli in the Europa League, in the Champions League, and they've beaten Napoli 4-2, 3-1, 4-0, all horrible results for Napoli. And I remember watching some of those games, and I was very sad. In this round of 16, Napoli finally have the chance to get their get back on Barcelona. Barcelona have been destroying us for the last 5 years, and I really hope in this matchup we can come out on top. Now, if you look at this season so far, I do think Napoli are the better team. Barcelona, yes, are still in the top 5 in the La Liga, but in recent weeks, we've seen them lose to Girona, they drew against Valencia, and even in the Champions League, they lost against Shakhtar and Royal Antwerp. Realistically, this could go either way, and I don't know who is going to advance, but I do think Napoli do have the edge over Barcelona, and for that reason, I really hope Napoli can advance. The next fixture we will be seeing is Inter Milan against Atletico Madrid. I honestly think that this is an incredible matchup, and I've been seeing a lot of people saying that this is a boring matchup. The games will be 1-0, 1-1. I think these games have a lot of goals in them, and I think these could be one of the best matchups of this round of 16. Both of these teams are doing very well in their domestic league. We've seen Atletico Madrid in the Champions League and in the La Liga play very well, and even though they did lose their last game, I still think they are one of the best teams in this competition. On the other hand, Inter Milan, in my opinion, look like one of the best teams in the world. We saw them in last year's Champions League, where they made it to the Champions League final and just fell short against Manchester City. So far this season in the Serie A, they are doing absolutely incredible, and honestly, they look like they're going to win the Scudetto already before Christmas. I do think that in terms of performances this season, I do think Inter Milan are probably one of the best teams in the world, and for that reason, I do think they are favored in this matchup. But you can never count out Atletico Madrid. We've seen them many times how good of a team they are, and I do think that they could definitely pull through to the next round as well. Moving on to the next matchup, we have FC Porto against Arsenal. I've been seeing a lot of English people, mainly Arsenal fans online, saying that they definitely will win this game and that Porto were one of the worst teams to get in the draw. But I think they're really underrating Porto. I mentioned it multiple times in my group stage prediction videos, where Porto are one of those teams in the Champions League where they always get underrated. No one ever thinks they're going to advance, but they always end up grinding out results. And I think against Arsenal, they could possibly upset them. Arsenal are obviously a fantastic team, and this season in the Premier League, they are at the top and they look like they are the favorites to win the Premier League title. But the problem with Arsenal is they don't have a lot of experience in this competition, where Porto, on the other hand, have a lot of experience. And yes, I do think Arsenal are the better team over Porto in this matchup, but we've seen how much history matters in the Champions League. If you all remember 2 years ago when Real Madrid won the Champions League, we saw them beat the likes of Manchester City, Chelsea, PSG, and I don't think they were that good that season, but with the history that they have, they were able to get results against all those giants. And in this matchup, I think Porto have a very good chance to upset Arsenal. So I'm not going to give my predictions just yet, but I do think, similar to what Sporting did against Arsenal last season in the Europa League, I do think Porto have a very good chance to upset the English giants. Moving on to the next game, we have PSG against Real Sociedad. I heard so many people complaining about this game, saying that PSG had the chance to face up against Real Madrid, Manchester City, Bayern Munich, and they ended up getting Real Sociedad, who most people think are a pretty bad team. But if you look at how they've been performing both in the Champions League and in the La Liga, you would know that they are an incredible team this season, and they definitely have a good chance against PSG. I personally think that PSG were very disappointing in the group stages because at the start of the competition, I think most people had PSG finishing first place in that group. And if you look at the last match day, they were on the verge of finishing in third place, and they were very close to getting knocked out of that competition. We saw PSG lose against AC Milan, they lost against Newcastle, they drew against Dortmund, and in the other game against Newcastle. And I don't think they've been performing their best this season. Yes, in the Liga, they are doing very well. But in this round of 16, I definitely think Real Sociedad have a good chance to beat them. Real Sociedad are doing very, very well in the La Liga this season, and they do have some incredible players on their team. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up upsetting PSG. I do think PSG are the favorites, but I think this is going to be a very, very close matchup. The next matchup we got is RB Leipzig against Real Madrid. Again, similar with some of the other matchups that we've seen, I've been hearing so many people saying that Real Madrid are going to easily win this game. But RB Leipzig are a really good team. We saw what they were able to do against Manchester City in the group stage, where yes, they did lose both of those games, but in both games they were able to score multiple goals, and honestly, they had many chances to win those fixtures against Manchester City. Obviously, Real Madrid are probably one of the best teams in the world, and we've seen players like Jude Bellingham, who this season looks like the best midfielder in the world, and I think him alone being on that team will help them immensely in this Champions League run. I'm not going to say if I think RB Leipzig or Real Madrid will win this matchup, but I do think Real Madrid are definitely the favorites, and they do probably have a higher percentage to advance to the next round. But you can never count out RB Leipzig because they are an incredible team, and I do think that there is a chance for them to upset Real Madrid. Moving on to the next matchup, we have Lazio against Bayern Munich. I'm pretty sure that most people think that in this matchup, Bayern Munich will win. And yes, even myself, I do think Bayern Munich have a much higher chance to advance to the next round than Lazio, because obviously I do watch the Serie A, and I see Lazio many times throughout the year. And yes, they are a good team. They have some good quality in that lineup, but they are just far too inconsistent to be able to do anything against Bayern Munich. Lazio are just one of those teams where they have the capability to beat some of the best teams in the world, but they also have the capability to lose against some of the worst teams in the Serie A. So that inconsistency that has been going around with Lazio this season is very worrying, I think, for Lazio fans. And for that reason, I don't think they have a good chance to advance against Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich are obviously one of the best teams in the world. We saw how good they were last season in the Champions League, and this season with some of their new additions like Harry Kane, Kim Min-jae, Guerrero, Konrad Laimer, they just look like a completely different team, and they look like, in my opinion, the best team in the world. And for that reason, I can only see Bayern Munich advancing from this round. I'm not saying that they're 100% guaranteed, but they are definitely the favorites. The next matchup we got is PSV Eindhoven against Borussia Dortmund. This matchup, in my opinion, could go either way, because at the start of the Champions League campaign, I thought Borussia Dortmund were going to finish last place in their group, but they proved everyone wrong. They ended up beating Milan, they beat the likes of Newcastle 2 times, and they even drew in one of their games against PSG. So their performances in the group stage were much higher than what most people expected them to do. PSV, on the other hand, were pretty good in the group stages. Not as good as Dortmund, because they did have a few slip-ups here and there, like the game where they lost 4-0 against Arsenal. But in the Eredivisie, they are one of the best teams in the world. They are the only club in the top 5 leagues which still hasn't lost a game in their domestic league. And I think in this Champions League, yes, against Dortmund, it will be tough, but I do think they have a pretty good chance to advance. I personally think that this matchup between PSV and Dortmund is completely 50-50. I think both of these teams have the exact same chance to advance. I think it will be incredibly close games, very tough games, and honestly, we're just gonna have to wait and see who makes it out, because I can't say it at the moment. And finally, the last matchup in this year's round of 16 in the Champions League is FC Copenhagen against Manchester City. Obviously, this matchup was just destined to happen. Within the last 3 or 4 years, every single group stage, every single round of 16, Manchester City, for some reason, have one of the worst teams in that competition. No disrespect to Copenhagen, because at the start of this Champions League, I did think they were going to get knocked out in last place, and obviously they proved everyone wrong. They beat Manchester United, they beat Galatasaray, and they ended up advancing. But against Manchester City, I just don't think they have any chance. Manchester City are one of the best teams in the world, and even though this season in the Premier League, they don't look as strong as they did last season or even the season before, I still think they are one of the best teams in the world. And it is really annoying how they keep getting these matchups against teams like Copenhagen or some of the other poorer teams in the Champions League. Now, I really hope Copenhagen can win this game. Not because I don't like Manchester City, but they get some of the easiest draws every single Champions League. And if Copenhagen end up beating Manchester City, I think that will be the upset of the 21st century. That will be an incredible upset, and I really hope that ends up happening. But realistically, Manchester City will probably win this game and advance to the next round. And those are all the Champions League fixtures that we have in this year's round of 16. I am so excited to watch these matchups in February or in March when they take place. I am so excited. I can't wait to see some of the upsets, some of the crazy games that we're going to get. And obviously, I'm going to be uploading loads and loads of videos on them. If you guys are excited to see my Champions League round of 16 predictions, which will be coming out closer to the date of these fixtures, let me know in the comments down below. And obviously, if you did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.